Good morning. Hi, everybody. It's Wednesday morning after Thanksgiving, and it's Banter with Beth this morning. I am so happy to be here, and I hope that you guys are having a great Wednesday. Why are we here? We're here to talk about the film that I've been producing and directing for the last 3 years, Would You Hide Me?, which is about 7 Jewish siblings who were hidden for 2 years outside of Berlin during World War II and their eventual emigration to America. I am lucky enough to be the daughter of the youngest of the survivors. So this is the story that we're telling. Banter with Beth was birthed because I was having amazing conversations with other people that are also working in the same film field that I am. They're telling survivor stories, they're telling stories of silent heroes, and I'm talking with journalists, and we're talking with, we have an opera singer coming on in 2 weeks. So this morning I am thrilled to bring on as my guest Jessica Goldstein, who is actually a distant cousin of mine, but she's a journalist who has an amazing story to tell. So it is Giving Tuesday week and month. Please go to bethlane.com, bethlane.com, or wouldyouhideme.com. There are donate buttons everywhere. Help us keep Would You Hide Me going. Help keep us in production so that we can get to the finish line. And we are grateful for any amount of any donations. So let me bring here's Jessica. Let's go live. Let's see if she's coming. Here she comes. I'm so excited. It's great. Connecting. Yay! Good morning. How you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you doing?
For you, right?
Yes. I appreciate that, honestly. That works better for me.
Good. I know, I was scrambling. I'm like, you can even see that my hair is still a little bit wet.
That's what people like in an Instagram live, you know, that down home, just out of the shower look.
Right, exactly. So tell me, how was your Thanksgiving?
You know what? It was nice considering that we couldn't, I didn't travel anywhere, wasn't with my family, but I was not the only person that I knew doing that. So, and the weather cooperated. So we had like a really lovely, socially distant outdoor Thanksgiving picnic. And I baked pies for the first time, and it was a great success.
Hey!
So just discovering new things about myself in quarantine.
That's like a rite of passage, learning how to bake your own Thanksgiving pie, right?
Thank you. I agree.
That's awesome. What kind of pies did you make?
I made apple and pumpkin. I covered all the bases.
Delicious.
How about you? What did you guys do?
We were here in Ojai, and I'm happy to say that Josh was able to drive in from Denver, and Oliver and Sebastian were also here. Actually, no, we spent Thanksgiving Day in the Palisades in Los Angeles because one of my sons had to work all day, and he didn't get off until like 4:30, 5 o'clock because he works for a network, and the networks were working on Thursday. So we had Thanksgiving in the Palisades, and then we all those of us that weren't working on Friday, we came out to Ojai, and we've been out here ever since. So that's been really, really nice. But you have to come visit. It's beautiful.
I know. As soon as we're allowed on planes.
Please, definitely. Yeah. So let's get right into it. I am so excited about the story. You wrote this story, almost 3. What's actually fascinating to me about your story, so I'm just gonna let you tell, because there's a really cool thing about your story that I want to talk about. So please tell everybody about the article that you wrote, the name of the article, why you wrote it, and where people can find it.
Yes. So I wrote about my grandpa Danny, my mom's dad, who was in the Army, served in World War II, and he saved everything, which to me is so remarkable because he was like this 18, 19-year-old kid, but he really had, he had the foresight to take a ton of photos, save his discharge papers in the original envelope, put everything in albums. And one of the things that he saved was this absolutely massive swastika flag that he and his fellow soldiers basically, like, I guess, at the end of the war, were at Hitler's vacation home in the Alps. And this was one of the things that they like pillaged from like the ruins of this house. And everybody who was in his battalion signed it, kind of like a yearbook. They signed it with their names and their hometowns. And it had been like one of those big banners that would have been like 30 feet long. But the part that he saved was like a 4-foot diameter circle that he'd like cut out of the flag. And he had held on to that for a very long time. Near the end of his life, he gave all of his Army sort of paraphernalia. He gave all of that to my mom to hold on to. And so it had been like in our house for most of, I feel like for most of my life. I had seen it as a child. And during and after the 2016 election, I just felt like we couldn't just keep this in a 2-gallon Ziploc in a closet in my parents' hallway. There has to be something more meaningful to do with this artifact. And so I decided, well, I talked to my family and got everybody's blessing to figure out a way to donate the flag and to write about that process. And so that's what I did. I wrote a story that was called What to Do with the Swastika in the Attic, and it was published in the New York Times and the Sunday Review in July of 2017.
Yes, and it's an amazing article. So if people go to the New York Times digital files and search for, what's the title, or just search under your name, Jessica Goldstein. And for people that are tuning into the podcast right now, this is Jessica Goldstein, and Jessica is my distant cousin, and she's a journalist who has written for a number of major newspapers and magazines and so forth. So Google Jessica, but New York Times obviously is like, pretty high up there, so you're fancy. Yeah, and you're also the editor of, is it the Washingtonian, or?
I'm a contributing editor. Yeah, Washingtonian.
Yeah, which is very, very cool. And you've written for Elle, and you've written for like a lot of, very shiny things. So, so that's great. So if people go to the New York Times and put your name in, will the article pop up?
It should, yeah. And I'm sure you guys have a website. I can have the link posted somewhere for folks if that makes it easier to find.
Sure, that would be great. And maybe even put it into a comment or something. And the article is called
What to Do with the Swastika in the Attic.
What to Do with the Swastika in the Attic. So what I think is really extraordinary about the piece that you wrote is that you wrote it in July, and Charlottesville happened a month later.
I actually wrote it in like January, February, and it took that long. It's just like a long editorial process. I want to say, well, I went down, it's in the article. I think I went and donated it in like a few weeks after, like shortly after Trump's inauguration.
Yes, that's right.
So I wrote it in the spring. Yeah. And then it was published in July. But it's true. The timing was eerie. The timing was definitely unsettling.
Yes. Yes. And when you think about that you're having this internal conversation enough that you were inspired to write about it, and then you take the actions that you took to get the flag donated, which is also an interesting conversation that so many repositories turned you down.
What was fascinating was just to discover, it's like you think you're the only one. Like, I think I'm the only one with this thing in my attic. But when you think about the scale of the war and how many people participated, it's like if you go into every American's attic, it's probably behind like a letter jacket and a slab trap that nobody ever used, is like maybe some Nazi paraphernalia from the war.
Except what you point out in your article, and this is what to me is so extraordinary, this wasn't just any swastika flag. This was actually in Hitler's home. This was Hitler's swastika flag. Yeah.
Yes. It was part of what made it appealing to the museum is that it was a flag with context. I think it's like the idea of just a flag that somebody knows is from the war. It's hard for a museum to necessarily use that to like tell a coherent story about any aspect of World War II or about the Nazi Party. But because we could place it, we could date it, we could say this was kind of the role that this flag had in this moment in history, it made it like a much more natural fit. And of course the signatures on it, which like that alone is its own, just like seeing all those names, there's like a million stories just in that.
For sure. And I want to talk about that also in a second. But then, so it gets published in July. Charlottesville happens in August. How do you feel?
I wish probably there's a German word for the feeling when like you're appalled by something, but you're not actually, like you are surprised, but you're not surprised. I wouldn't have written about it if I didn't think it was going to be relevant. I didn't expect it to be quite so literal. But I guess you could actually say that that is a motto for my feelings about like the duration of like the Trump era. Like I didn't expect it to be quite so on the nose.
Right.
But it was. And certainly I had a really, it's one of the stories that I hear about the most, and people reach out to me about it a lot. And there was a spike for sure in just emails that I received and tweets that I got after Charlottesville happened.
Right, right. And then I think it's just extraordinary that at the time, the president did not condemn what happened,
Mm-hmm.
still has not nationally condemned it. When I talk to people that are his supporters, they say, oh, yes, he condemns white supremacy. Oh, yes, he condemns nationalism. Yes, he does, he does, he does. Maybe he does it at his rallies. I don't know. I've never been to one. Maybe he does it at donor dinners or something. I'm not sure. But I personally have never heard him condemn it unilaterally.
Yeah, I mean, I think the line that will, among the many that will sort of like haunt his presidency, is that there were very fine people on both sides.
Right.
I think that even if at some point that I also did not hear he made like an unequivocal and clear condemnation of white supremacy, certainly didn't do it as emphatically as he insisted that there were like two sides to a hate crime.
Right, right. So that's like one avenue around it. And how different would our country be today had he condemned it?
You know, I don't know, because if he had condemned it and everything else about him were the same,
right?
I'm not really sure. I mean, it's interesting because these things that we think of is like, oh, well, of course the politicians are going to say we send our thoughts and prayers after a horrible event. But to have a president who actually never does that, you do see that like the level of compassion just plummets.
Yeah.
These things that seem sort of perfunctory, we do need them, not as an end unto themselves, but at least as the beginning of something.
Right, for sure. So let's circle back again to your grandpa, because you...
Yes, who I have in the frame.
Say it again. Yeah.
Who I have in the frame.
Show everybody. Everybody, your grandpa. Pull the picture down. Let's see. Let's see.
I also got so many messages that were like, your grandpa's so handsome. I was like, thank you.
He is.
I'm sure he'd love to know that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. But you are in the unique position. So I'm the daughter of a survivor, but you are the granddaughter, really, of two grandpas who served our country in unique and unusual ways. Because they were truly at the front. Really, really both at the front in very, very different ways. Do you want to talk about how they both served?
Yeah, it's really interesting because in a way, in like my family, you get this, you cover like the whole war, because my dad's dad, as you know, fought in the Pacific. And I believe for a time was like a driver for General MacArthur's wife, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. And my mom's dad was in Europe, and I feel almost in this like Forrest Gumpy way, was in like every battle. I'm very grateful that he was open to doing this and that I had the foresight to do it. I like interviewed him, my grandpa Danny, the one in the frame, about his service. So we have like the whole narrative, possibly embellished a tiny bit about his experiences in combat. So yeah, as you say, it's a very rich family history. Absolutely.
For sure, for sure. And just like to rewind again, because you kind of like skimmed over it. Yes, your grandpa Arthur was absolutely a driver, not just for anybody's wife, but for General MacArthur's wife.
That's right. That's right. And another thing that he's talked to me about, and that my grandpa Danny talked to me about, were just the experiences of like being, for many of their like fellow soldiers, like the first Jewish person that they'd ever met, and kind of being in this situation where you're dealing with anti-Semitism from within, while ostensibly one of the reasons that you're in this fight at all is because you're trying to quell anti-Semitism from without. And that like tension to me has always been really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think, is next in terms of how, I think right now, journalists have been getting it's been such a difficult job for journalists, certainly in the last 4 years, to be able to do what they do so successfully because of what's happening from our current administration's fake news and all this stuff. And I consider you guys actually to be also frontline workers in what you're doing, because you're fighting the good fight and you're oftentimes putting yourselves in harm's way, whether you're out in the field at a protest or even if you're publishing a piece of news, you have the potential to be getting mail that is either friendly or not friendly, you know, all kinds of things. How is it going for you?
You know, it's interesting because I'm a freelancer, and so I'm like a one-woman newsroom, and there are certainly times where I miss the camaraderie of having like the broader support system of a newsroom. Although the beauty of being on my own is that I can be a bit choosier about what I do and don't cover. And I've been pretty fortunate in that I do write about politics sometimes, but I write about it from a cultural angle. I wrote about Doug Emhoff, who's going to be our first second gentleman. Stories like that don't tend to incite the same level of vitriol that you're describing.
Good.
But I've certainly seen just a rise in, I think to me, very alarming kind of out of hand dismissal of entire outlets of just like, I don't read the Washington Post because it's too liberal. Which is somebody who worked there, that's kind of like a hilarious accusation to me that it was such a like liberal place, because it didn't seem like a super liberal place to work. You know, these are like pretty traditional institutions. So that that really unnerves me, and it worries me to see. I feel like every day that I log onto Twitter, I see another round of layoffs and another local outlet closing. And those are like, when I think about who, even people who for whatever reason don't trust national media, there used to be a sense that like you could trust the journalist that you knew, who lived in your town, who went to your schools, who was your neighbor. And now it's like, if people are only getting even their local news from like a Sinclair owned station that's going to have its own bent. I'm not the first person to make this observation, but it means that we're not all working with the same set of facts. And especially during something like this pandemic, we see how literally fatal it is to not have some shared understanding of reality.
Absolutely, for sure. Let's talk about the arts and cultures aspect of what you do. It's something that I know you and I share a love for, and it was so much fun for me to learn that when you began your career in journalism, that's what you were doing, arts and culture. And of course, with the pandemic and everything, there's been such a major shift in how you're able to cover that area of news. What kinds of things are you able to cover right now?
It's totally changed.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I kind of go back and forth with it, because sometimes I can have this feeling that why would anybody care about this right now? And yet at the same time, you see that what people are turning to like get through is this album that changed my life, this TV show that I'm binge watching, this movie that I'm watching, like the arts that people are still able to consume, even though they can only do it from home. So I think the biggest challenge for me in terms of just coverage is that as a culture reporter, I get my best ideas from just being out in the world and talking to people and eavesdropping on people on the metro and like mingling and banter and just seeing what other people who aren't thinking about this for a living get excited about, get curious about, get angry about. And that's where like so many of the good story ideas come from. So the biggest challenge has been maintaining that level of like social and cultural awareness when you're living in relative isolation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, I can appreciate that. What are you working? Can you tell us what you're working on right now?
Yeah, let's see. What am I working on right now? I'm a contributor to the Washington Post Magazine's Date Lab column, which for those of you who don't live in the area, who don't know, you can apply to be match made, and we send you on a blind date. And then we write about your date, and we really try to set people up for success. And that too has had to evolve because of COVID. So people go on Zoom dates or they go on picnic dates. So I'm writing about, they went on a date last night, actually. So I'll be talking to my daters tonight. Hopefully they found some joy in this dark, dark time. And I still write for Vulture. I do a lot of television recaps. So people who watch Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which comes back at the end of the year, I'm recapping that. People who watched Dickinson on Apple TV, I'll be recapping that in January. If you're one of the many, many people who watched Emily in Paris, my recap's already up for you. So yeah, it's more like indoor cat writing, less like getting sent, like I used to do things like go to adulting school and see what that's like, or go to a concert. And I miss that a lot. But like everybody else, I've just tried to be adaptable.
Right, and I think the relationship between what's happening now and what was really happening in World War II is very similar. I mean, of course, Jews were forbidden to have radios, and they certainly couldn't have newspapers. So to actually get news and to get any kind of cultural comfort to make your world feel somewhat normal was restricted so much. And we have Netflix now, we have HBO, we have all of our computers and our digital media coming to us. So it's coming to us, but it's coming to us in a very, very different way. There's no water cooler conversation.
You're so right. I hadn't thought about that, but that's an excellent point, that the isolation that people were dealing with in that context was just so much more intense than even what we're dealing with now.
And how we turn to the arts to get comfort, to feel a sense of normalcy. Even at the concentration camps, they specifically were requiring any musician to actually play music, classical music, to calm people, because we know that the arts have such a dramatic effect on people psychologically, emotionally, even physically. So of course we won't even get into why they were doing what they were doing at the concentration camps with musicians. For some musicians, it actually helped them survive by playing for the higher ups and the SS officers and so forth. But the arts and the means of storytelling, whether it's in the magazine or a podcast or a movie or a television show, it is something that I think is part of our cultural community of how we relate to each other and to the world is through the arts.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing too, when I think about where people have been like trying to donate their money, I know Giving Tuesday was the other day, when they're thinking about when all this is over and I'm allowed out in the world again, what do I hope is still there? And people are thinking about like, will my favorite movie theater survive? Will my favorite concert venue still be there? Will the independent bookstore that I love still be there? So I think now that all of those places, which I think always operate on like a pretty thin margin, are really feeling just the hurt and the loss through this pandemic, you're seeing hopefully people are in a position to even show like how much they really value those arts institutions.
Yes, for sure. And if I can just do like a little mini plug for Giving Tuesday and for the film that we're trying to push up the mountain, Giving Tuesday, it doesn't matter if it's $5 or if it's, whatever with a bunch of zeros after it. As long as people are contributing to the conversation and if they can throw in a couple bucks, I think more institutions will survive. And I think, certainly I know for our case, for our film, we will get to the finish line. So just go to bethlane.com and hit the donate button. But this is not, I really want to talk about your writing and your material. And you were talking about the dating thing, which for some people might think is a far-fetched reach to what our conversation, our banter is today. But I actually don't think it is a far-fetched reach, because if you think about all of the partners who were abandoned because their partners were going overseas to fight, it just makes me think of the Julie Stein song, Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night of the Week, right? So it's a real thing, and how people turn to love, of course, in a time of such stress and a time of isolation. So what you're doing, when did you launch this entire dating?
Date Lab is like a Washington Post magazine institution. It's sort of like Vows at the Times. Like, it's been there forever. And we get applicants all the time who say, like, I grew up reading Date Lab. I've known about Date Lab forever. What's been really interesting to see too is how many people have applied like since the pandemic started. There was a dip at the beginning when everybody we didn't know anything. We were Cloroxing our groceries and we had no idea what was safe and what wasn't safe. And then as it became clear that we were going to be in this for the long haul, I think, like what we were talking about with arts, I think that those sort of basic primal human needs, they will find a way. And one of those needs is to experience intimacy and to lead some semblance of a normal life, which for people who are single can involve dating. And in some ways, like going through the Date Lab process now, it's like we vet everybody. So you don't have to do You have to fill out your own profile, but it's a lot less work. You just have to be willing to have us write about it, but we're very nice.
Right. That's very cool. Will you do it for yourself?
I would not. I think it would be a bit of a conflict as somebody who writes on it. And you do have to be ready to, like, this could come up when people Google you, which I'm like a little bit more private than that. But I have friends who have done it, who've had really good experiences. And even like the bad experiences, they're usually like funny bad. They're not, bad.
Good.
So, and you're doing like a public service by giving everybody else something to think about and root for by participating in our matchmaking process.
Sure. So that's only one piece of what you do. What's next for you? What do you see yourself doing after the new year?
The hope is that after the new year, like with all things pandemic related, I just hope that things turn a corner. Lots of the places that I write for have been like pretty strapped, so it's just hard to work with freelancers as much as they used to, and there's less going on. So like a movie that you thought you'd review that's not coming out for another year, stories you thought you'd do. So my hope is just that there's like a new kind of jolt of life, and so there's more opportunity and there are more stories to be done. I'm not really much of a planner, and I think that that's actually helping me out, because if I were somebody who wanted to know what I was doing in March, April, May of next year right now, I think I'd be panicking. But I'm very much like, as long as I have something to do tomorrow.
Yes.
That's totally fine.
Well, you're a center fielder. You're just waiting to catch up. You're sniffing out the next story and you're waiting to come your way. I think it was Michael Jordan. There's this famous quote that he says, just let the ball come to you.
Yes.
Let it come to you.
In DC, there's always like kind of a new rush of culture, action, personalities when a new administration comes in, because it's like they set a new tone in the city. Their staffers bring like a new, especially when it's a shift from like a Democratic or Republican administration to the other, it's like the whole mood changes. And that has an effect on everything. It has an effect, of course, on, work life, but it also affects people's dating lives and their friendships and the whole like culture and vibe of the city. Assuming our city gets to have a culture and a vibe, like it just depends on if we're all allowed to go outside. But hopefully things will improve and we'll get like a whole new energy from a Biden administration and everything that brings with it.
Yes. Well, if the stock market gives us any sign, I think that we're in for a whole new batch of fresh and good and yeah, I'm so grateful that you accepted my invitation to come on today.
My pleasure.
And it's always fun catching up. And, I miss our Passovers together. I miss our Rosh Hashanah together. So we have to just have them on Zoom. And as you know, I call you your grandpa every day. And I sing.
Yes, and you serenade him.
I do. Today, I think I'll have to sing him Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night of the Week. That's probably.
I think so.
Yeah. But I'll leave it on you to convince him to get to his computer to rewatch this podcast. I know.
Yes.
I'm getting on Instagram, but we will put the replay on IGTV, but we'll also put the replay on our YouTube channel. So. Perfect. If you can guide him toward the YouTube channel, then he can see your beautiful face getting interviewed.
I think we can make that happen. I think for this, he'll figure it out.
Good. That's wonderful. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody who's logged in here at the end, this is Jessica Goldstein, who is a journalist and writes for several notable newspapers, not the least of which is the New York Times, and is a contributing editor to the Washingtonian, has written for Elle and Vulture and all kinds of wonderful magazines and newspapers. And Jessica, say the name of your article one more time so people can Google it.
Yes, the article is What to Do with the Swastika in the Attic, and it came out in the New York Times Sunday Review in July of 2017.
Awesome. Good. Sending you a big hug.
Yes, so good to see you.
You too. Until we meet again.
Bye.
Bye.